Cairo Sweet is an 18-year-old schoolgirl living in a small deserted town in the suburbs of Tennessee. She lives alone in a nice empty mansion because her parents like to travel. In a small town, she finds her only solace, and that solace is literary novels. Cairo's teacher, Professor Jonathan Miller, shares the same love of novels. The gray-haired professor lives in town with his wife Beatrice, but unlike his student, he finds such a quiet life happy and romantic. The only thing the writer lacks is self-confidence and recognition of his talent. Another school day is no different from the previous ones. Mr. Miller goes to class with a small bouquet of flowers in his hand and prepares for his literature class. That's where Cairo finds him. The girl arrives before the others to discuss the program and the upcoming exams with the teacher. She admits that she has already read all the books and would like an extra task.
Well, there's 12 books on that list.
I read the whole list.
They talk about all sorts of things, but the conversation is interrupted by Cairo's friend Winnie. Schoolgirl bursts into the classroom, laughing loudly and teasing Cairo. Friends leave the classroom to get coffee. Miller can't wait and examines Cairo's books. The professor is surprised because the novels are too adult. Boris, his friend, catches him in the act and teases him. He also works at the school as a gym teacher. In the evening, Miller tells his wife about his students' books. He tells Beatrice that he finally has a student in his class who loves literature as much as he does. But none of these interests the woman very much. She is distracted by a work call and asks Jonathan to wait for her in the living room. Obviously, she doesn't care about her husband's interests anymore. Miller's attempts to get closer to his wife fail. Beatrice prefers to go back to work, and she instructs him to do the cleaning and wash the dishes. Boris is the only one who listens to Miller in his spare time. They gather on a school bench and discuss a mysterious forest that is rumored to be haunted. At that moment, mysterious Cairo appears from behind the trees. A girl walks up to the teachers to say hello, but Boris has to leave in a hurry to get ready for class. Miller and his student are left alone. They are awkwardly silent, and don't guess where this will lead them next. At school, Cairo sees Winnie flirting with the gym teacher. She asks Winnie why she is doing this. Winnie just smiles and calls it a game. The friends spend the evening together in Cairo's room. They talk a lot about their studies and the fact that they have to write final essays in literature. Cairo realizes she wants to impress the literature teacher and begins to study the novel Miller wrote. They talk about men, and it leads to a discussion about their innocence. Winnie is convinced that their first partner in life should be someone experienced. She has already set herself a challenging goal to seduce Boris. Girl convinces her friend that she has a fan too. Winnie admits that it was the first time she had ever seen Mr. Miller so happy, the moment he was talking to his student. Cairo manages to read the teacher's book overnight and write an essay for the next class. Miller checks Cairo's work and looks at the girl with interest during the lecture. Later, he asks Cairo to stay after class to discuss something. Miller waits for Cairo in the classroom. Boris visits him. Miller reminds Boris that he and Beatrice have invited him to dinner this evening. In anticipation of an interesting evening, Professor begins to dance, and Cairo is already watching him at the door. Miller invites Cairo to sit down, and the two have a long conversation about literature. He allows Cairo to choose her own topic for the final work. This is Miller's way of making her stand out from the rest. Miller also invites her to join him for a literary evening that takes place every Saturday in their town. He's sure the girl can love her town if she makes friends there. As a token of her gratitude, Cairo quotes a few lines from the book, which Miller himself wrote. For the first time in many years, a man hears words of praise addressed to him. His interest in the girl grows. Winnie enters the classroom and they have to stop talking. The girls say goodbye to the professor and go home, and Miller goes to the bar where his wife and Boris are waiting for him. All evening, Beatrice argues with Winnie, who works as a part-time waitress at the bar, but the girl pays no attention. She devotes all her time to Boris, hoping to achieve her goal. Boris wants to avoid questions about his affair with Winnie, so he suggests to Miller that they talk about Cairo. Beatrice suspects that her husband has a crush on a talented girl. A mock discussion begins at the table, and Beatrice insults Miller. She calls him untalented. Cairo arrives on Saturday for a literary evening. She is welcomed with pleasure by Miller. He leans in close to the girl, inhaling the scent of her hair. Miller tells the girl about the writers who have gathered for the event. For several hours, the two listen to stories by unknown authors. The professor doesn't notice that Cairo is secretly watching him. The evening makes such an impression on Miller that he doesn't hold back and flirts with the girl. This time, Cairo catches the man's eye and looks in the same way. She looks into Miller's eyes and understands that he is in love. At school, Cairo pretends that nothing special has happened. She happily brings coffee to the teachers and chats with Boris and Miller. Boris gives her the cookies he made. Cookies are delicious and Cairo comes up with a plan. She advises the coach to start selling cookies to support the team, and Winnie can help him. Boris leaves and the couple is alone again. But now they don't feel awkward. Later, Jonathan receives an invitation from his wife to spend the weekend out of town. Cairo finds an excuse to see the professor, and together with Winnie, They go to the classroom. She asks him to approve the work on which she has decided to write her final essay. The choice surprises Miller, as the story turns out to be too frank. But Cairo manages to convince the old man. She assures him that she can do the work and he will be satisfied. Miller, in a hurry, picks up his things from the table and runs away. He doesn't notice that he has accidentally taken Cairo's cell phone with him. When he asks for her phone to write Boris's number, Cairo discovers her phone is missing. A phone rings in Miller's bag while he waits for his wife. Cairo tells the teacher that he accidentally took her cell phone. She asks him to give it back before they leave town. Jonathan goes to Cairo's house and she meets him in a beautiful dress. This time the man can't control himself. He kisses her. Cairo can't sleep after what happened. All evening she thinks about the kiss, while Mr. Miller reads her essay. His weekend with his wife has gone wrong. Beatrice is unable to leave work and asks her husband to leave her alone so as not to disturb her. This is exactly what Miller wants. He retreats to the barn and carefully reads Cairo's story in silence. The girl's fantasies so excite the man that he cannot restrain himself. Miller imagines himself and the student in the shoes of the protagonists. Did the intimacy really happen, or was it just the gray-haired professor's fantasy? Surely only he and Cairo know. When Cairo goes to school, she notices that there is no one on the coach's bench. Also, she doesn't find Miller in the classroom. Finally, the teacher comes to the office, but the girl realizes that he is ignoring her and won't even say hello. Miller tells the student that it's all about her story. He thinks it is too explicit for a schoolgirl, and if the administration reads this essay, the girl might get in trouble. The professor demands that Cairo choose a different topic and write a new story. Miller hints that everything that happened between them was a mistake. Cairo takes great offense to the teacher for refusing to accept her essay, but what hurts her even more is that the man has dumped her and doesn't want to continue the affair. In retaliation, she says many hurtful words to him. Miller had heard this from his wife many times before. Cairo hints to the teacher that he may greatly regret his mistake. She hopes the professor will change his mind, but Miller remains adamant. Later, Cairo drops a sealed, thick envelope in the principal's mailbox. Then she goes home without ever looking back. Beatrice notices her husband's bad mood, but Miller doesn't talk about what happened. On the contrary, Cairo tells Winnie in detail about her experiences. Miller then shows Cairo's essay to his wife. The husband says that the girl was only offended because he didn't accept the honest story. Beatrice wishes to support her husband. She decides to give him an evening of passion, but Boris ruins the hot moment. Buddy walks in without knocking. While Boris is at the Miller's house, Cairo invites her friend over for some fun. She asks her to write some sweet messages to Boris and start a conversation. Afterwards, Cairo approaches Winnie and kisses her. She films the process on her cell phone. Then Cairo sends pictures from Winnie's cell phone to Boris and assures her friend that it's just an innocent joke. Winnie has no idea what the offended Cairo is up to. The pics surprise and excite the teacher. Boris hides the phone from the curious Beatrice, but she manages to see the photo. She suspects that her friend has started an affair. Cairo doesn't tell anyone about the envelope she sent to the vice principal. Beatrice answers the phone and hands it to her husband. She says he is being called to the principal's office. Miller locks himself in the bathroom while his wife is having fun with Boris. Man sees that Beatrice is drunk and leaves the house to stay out of trouble. The professor tells his wife that the student's story has raised many questions. It turns out that Cairo left a confession of love for the professor on the cover. Miller admits that he fears being fired. But instead of support, Beatrice says she will leave her husband if his guilt is proven. Woman demands that Miller tell her what really happened, but the professor denies it all. He assures her that these are just schoolgirl fantasies. After class, Mr. Miller prepares to speak with the principal. He is approached by a distraught Winnie. She asks the teacher to explain what is going on between him and Cairo. Miller refuses to talk about what happened. He waits to be called into the principal's office, where Professor begins his story. Professor insists that there was nothing special between him and the student, but he admits that he chose Cairo because of her talent. He also admits that he took her to a literary evening and allowed her to smoke. Cairo's version is more interesting. The girl doesn't talk directly about whether they had intimacy. She remembers many moments when she was alone with her teacher. Miller's story reaches the moment with the phone, and he admits that he was at Cairo's house. He assures everyone that he was just returning the phone, but Cairo hints at more. Jonathan Miller is temporarily suspended. Later, he tells Boris that he is in love with Cairo, but doesn't want to be put on trial. This leads to an argument between the men. Coach is convinced that the friend crossed the line and that it was his own fault. Beatrice doesn't side with her husband either. She is certain that Miller had a relationship with the student. Professor is forced to admit that he flirted with Cairo. She calls Miller a talentless man again and admits that she can't stand him anymore. They have a fight, after which Jonathan realizes he's on his own. Cairo has no regrets and continues to write stories. She even speaks rudely to her friend, telling her not to interfere in her life. Cairo says that she will testify against Miller in front of the school board and that Winnie shouldn't try to stop her. Otherwise, she'll tell everyone about Winnie and Boris, and then the coach will lose his job just like his friend. To show what it's all about, Cairo gets up on the bed and reads the end of her story. She described in detail the events that happened to her and Miller. The girl doesn't care that the professor is going crazy and his life is broken. The next time she sees Miller, it's clear from his expression that he's lost everything, but it only brings a satisfied smile to Cairo's face.